very quickly, I'm going to introduce our wonderful workshop hosts, and then I'm just going to pass it over to them for the duration of this workshop. So first, freygl is a non-binary, queer, multiply crip mad post-Soviet first-generation immigrant settler, white Ashkenazi Jewish, whose people are from present-day Moldova. Faye is a cultural organizer and writer who lives in Toronto, and online. And by the way, I will be posting their entire bios after I say them all, so that way you can see more information. So just bear with me for a second. Okay, so who is next? Okay, so Misha is a trans Jewish anarchist and co-founder of Peacock, a queer anarchist pay what you can cafe in Glasgow. Ruby, or Rachel, is a poet and translator. She sings in the Yiddish chorus and concert ensemble of the Boston Workers Circle and has been the vocalist and drummer in a klezmer band, as well as teaching Yiddish. And last, but certainly not least, is Sorka, who is a klezmer dancer and Yiddishist based in upstate New York. She organizes with Rad Yiddish and Queer Yiddish Camp, plays in several bands, and serves as treasurer for a local arts organization. So without further ado, this is for all of you to take over. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Julie. Shalom Aleichem, Baruch haba. Thank you all for making this workshop part of your Farbindungen. My name is freygl. I have pale skin, brown curly hair with green tips, and a white background. Some access information. CART is available for this session. Thank you, Sarah, our captioner. We may be taking occasional access pauses to allow them to catch up. We want to acknowledge that there is no ASL interpretation, so this workshop is not necessarily accessible to everyone who may have wanted it. We will describe images used on the slide and give short visual descriptions of who is speaking. We encourage feedback in the chat if we're speaking too quickly or not clearly enough. This workshop is being recorded. However, we'll pause the recording anytime upon request if you don't want your share to be recorded, and during breakout rooms. Our workshop title, The Future of Yiddish is Accessible, references The Future is Disabled, a phrase coined by Alice Wong, which is the title of Leah Lakshmi Piepzna Samarasinha's book, the cover of which is on the slide with a clock and bright colors. We are also indebted to the work of the Sins Invalid Collective, a Queers of Color-led disability justice performance art collective based in the Bay Area, from whom we source much of our framing for this workshop. And we are grateful for their work and the work of all of our disabled Yiddish ancestors.
We'll start with introductions. While we're talking, we encourage everyone to introduce themselves in the chat with your name, pronouns, access needs, where you're calling in from, and Yiddish organizational affiliation. So my name is Ruby or Rachel Poltorak. I am a light-skinned white person with pink hair and a black shirt. And behind me is a backdrop of Ukrainian fields, but I'm coming in from Newton, Mass, which is on Massachusetts and Wampanoag territories. My access, and I'm she, her, hers, my access needs are taken care of right now. And I organize with Boston Workers Circle.
Hello, I am Morgan or Misha Holleb. My verbal description is that I'm a white boy with round gold framed glasses and like a very gay little mustache. And behind me is, I'm in the Pink Peacock Cafe. So it's very pink in here and there's like fairy lights behind me. My pronouns are he, him, and my access needs are that if there's that you stay muted if you're not speaking, please, because of sounds. I'm very sound sensitive. I'm calling in from Glasgow in Scotland, and the main Yiddish group that I organize with is Die Chosva Pava, or the Pink Peacock Cafe, where I currently am.
This is freygl speaking again. My access needs are around no sharp sounds coming through the speakers when you're unmuted as well. And I am in Toronto, on Anishinaabe, Wendat, Seneca, Petun, and Mississauga of the Credit Land. I organize with Queer Yiddish Camp and Rad Yiddish. We also want to introduce Sarah Schneider, who was incredibly central to organizing this entire workshop, but who has unfortunately lost her voice and can't present out loud. She's based in Ithaca on Cayuga land and organizes with the Ithaca Klezmer Ensemble. And we also want to extend huge thank yous to Elaine Moss, who created most of the gorgeous slide deck we'll be using today and contributed to workshop development, as well as thank Moira Rosenstein, who helped with a lot of the initial framing of this workshop around disability justice.
Our goals for this workshop are to define the core principles of what we mean by disability justice, to discuss how these principles can and have informed Yiddish cultural organizing, to explore what it means to create a truly accessible Yiddish organization, space, or event, and to learn how to ground future Yiddish organizing in the principles of disability justice. This will not be us telling you how to make a perfect accessible event or space, because your community and organization's needs are going to be highly context dependent. As we will learn, accessibility is not about achieving an ideal, but is best approached as a commitment to how we organize together. So we'll be asking you to reflect and share your reflections with the group if you like. You may want to have a way to write down or record your thoughts. We'll be presenting material and describing case studies, and after that, we'll send you into breakout rooms. Sarah, our lovely captioner, is going to stay in the main room. So anyone using Heart, please message Julie, the Zoom tech, now so that you aren't placed in a breakout room. And if you end up being invited to a breakout room anyway, and you want to stay with Sarah for captioning, you can just decline the invitation to the breakout room.
Why are we here? We'll start by asking ourselves, why are we here? What's your current connection to or understanding of disability justice and building access cultures? Yours can mean yours personally, your family, your community, your organization or institution. What's something you're hoping to learn from this workshop? Please put this in the chat or raise your hand to share if that's more accessible to you.
So I know folks are still introducing themselves in the chat, but I'm going to look out for any responses that have to do with, what you're hoping to learn. And I see Camila has raised their hand, so go ahead.
Hi, I am particularly interested in talking about nomenclature for disability in Yiddish. And my connection to disability justice is a very long time of doing accessibility coordinating at my synagogue and for other places and events I've organized.
Thank you, Camila. Anyone else want to share in the chat or raise your hand to share? Benjamin writes, I really appreciate the framing of disability justice and access cultures as a way of working together. So I'm excited to expand on that together. Thank you, Benjamin. We'll just wait for 1 or 2 more responses and then we'll move on. Elka, yes, please share.
Yeah, sorry. I'm excited to learn about making spaces more COVID accessible. It's a big accessibility need for me. And there has been, I feel, a decrease in spaces becoming accessible, both in Yiddish world and in outside Yiddish world. And I feel like when I'm putting together an event, I'm not necessarily sure 100% of everything that I could or should be doing or asking others to do.
Thanks, Elka. And Christina shares, we've been doing a lot of work on accessibility for the oral histories at the Yiddish Book Center via transcripts, metadata work, and searchability. Curious to hear more about what others are working on in Yiddish spaces. Awesome. And Alona says +1 to Elka. All right, feel free to keep using the chat to post, and we will move on to an introduction to disability justice. Queer disabled Puerto Rican Jewish writer, activist, and land tender Aurora Levins Morales writes, "There is no neutral body from which our bodies deviate." Sins Invalid writes, in their disability justice primer, the disability rights framework centers people who can achieve status, power, and access through a legal or rights-based framework, which we know is not possible for many disabled people or appropriate for all situations, at the expense of developing a broad-based popular movement. For the next few slides, they're taken directly from the introduction of the primer verbatim. So can I please get volunteers to read them out loud? One person can just come off mute and begin reading. They're long, so feel free to pass any time, and then we'll ask someone else to come off mute. Camila, go ahead.
What is disability justice? Sins Invalid, Disability Justice Primer. Disability justice activists, organizers, and cultural workers understand that able-bodied supremacy has been formed in relation to other systems of domination and exploitation. The histories of white supremacy and ableism are inextricably entwined, created in the context of colonial conquest and capitalist domination. One cannot look at the history of US slavery, the stealing of indigenous lands, and US imperialism without seeing the way the white supremacy uses ableism to create a lesser/other group of people that is deemed less worthy /abled/smart/capable. A single issue civil rights framework is not enough to explain the full extent of ableism and how it operates in society. And I'll pass to someone else.
I can go. We can only truly understand ableism by tracing its connections to heteropatriarchy, white supremacy, colonialism, and capitalism. The same oppressive systems that inflicted violence upon Black and Brown communities for 500+ years also inflicted 500+ years of violence on bodies and minds deemed outside the norm and therefore dangerous. Furthermore, racism, anti-Islamic beliefs, ableism, and imperialism come together to feed us images of the terrorist as dangerous brown enemy, and other who is sexually and mentally wrong. All this is compounded by the ways ableism, along with queer hatred and the violence of the gender binary, label our bodies and communities as deviant, unproductive, and invalid.
Thank you to all our readers. So in contrast to a disability rights framework, the primer proclaims a disability justice framework understands that all bodies are unique and essential. All bodies have strengths and needs that must be met. We are powerful, not despite the complexities of our bodies, but because of them. and all bodies are confined by ability, race, gender, sexuality, class, nation, state, religion, and more, and we cannot separate them.
Does everyone have a way to write something down or record? We are going to read through the 10 principles of disability justice as outlined by Sins Invalid. We'll share a resource document at the end that includes links to much fuller explanations of these principles, including via ASL, and give examples of some of these principles in action. As we read through, we'd like you to jot down or record 1 or 2 ways you think of these as connecting to how we organize in Yiddish land.
Intersectionality, as in considering all our intersecting identities.
Leadership of the most impacted, AKA nothing about us without us.
Anti-capitalist politics. Our worth is not dependent on what we can produce or pay, and resisting competition.
Commitment to cross-movement organizing, challenging racism in disability spaces and challenging ableism in other movement spaces. And taking that a step further, to show up for racial justice, migrant justice, abolition, land back, and other movements as disabled people, queers, Yiddishists, etc. Example, in fall 2021, a coalition of groups, including Rad Yiddish and Yiddishists in Mid-Palestina, organized Yiddishists for Stop Line 3, a cabaret fundraiser that raised $3,600 for 2 queer Indigenous frontline land protector collectives.
Recognizing wholeness, disabled people as whole people with whole lives, experiences, histories, thoughts, sensations, and desires.
Sustainability, a move away from the white supremacist and capitalist drive for urgency and disposability into deep, slow, transformative process. Example, the Disability Justice Vocab Project began as a conversation in a Facebook group about the problematic outdated terms in Yiddish describing disability and the need for updated terms describing our disabled experiences. The project moves at a slow pace as their capacity allows, and this is more important than trying to push ourselves to complete it by an arbitrary deadline.
Commitment to cross-disability solidarity.
Interdependence, aka mutual aid, meeting our needs without state interventions and liberation of the land tied to liberation of our communities.
Collective access, meaning everyone has needs. Some needs are just regularly met by society without having to advocate for them. So they are taken for granted. And people whose needs are not met by the way society is currently structured are seen as individual burdens to accommodate. Instead, collective access means sharing responsibility for meeting everyone's needs as a community.
Collective liberation, leaving no one behind.
You heard examples for 2 of the principles. Now, let's delve deeper into the practical applications of guiding our organizing with the rest of the disability justice principles. Freygl and Morgan are going to take us through a pair of case studies about how this worked out with the Pink Peacock Cafe and Queer Yiddish Camp. This slide shows the logos of these community organizations.
Accessibility has always been built into the cafe from the beginning because in addition to being overwhelmingly queer as a collective, most of us have at least one disability. So when implementing accessibility, I learned that some of it is surprisingly easy, some of it requires ongoing work, some of it is free, and some of it is expensive. There are many things to list because we've been open for 18 months and we as a cafe, and we'd been doing live stream events for almost a year before that. And I want to focus on some practical examples that we've implemented. There are too many to list, so or someone will drop a link to our website if you want to see a more full list. And you can look at the slides. I've tried to include as many as I could fit on there. So I just want to give you an image description of this slide. There's a bathroom with lilac walls, navy blue handrails, an emergency red pull cord, and many, many blue evil eyes hanging from the ceiling, because it's important to us that accessibility is also aesthetic. So here's some successes that are things that we just did once and then they're just done. Ramps, we built them ourselves and they were cheap. We built the bathroom ourselves and it was expensive because it requires all these pieces like toilets, and we had to build walls in order to make a bathroom that could accommodate, like that was the big enough size to be accessible. Something else that we did once, I'm actually not sure if this fits better on once or ongoing, but we've made the decision to be a dry space as opposed to a sober space, to reflect that the important thing for us about the space is that people are respectful to each other, and we don't judge people if they come in and they're not completely sober or they're not sober at all. That doesn't bother us as long as they are nice to everybody. So some examples of ongoing work that we like, access work that we're doing all the time. Also, I want to apologize for, I'm in the cafe right now, so there is like the bell on the door is ringing as people come in and out. Just some of the more interesting things to me, we do a weekly low sensory day where we just play white noise or bird song or whale noise, whale song. So someone mentioned COVID earlier. In most places in the UK, all COVID measures have been abandoned, but they're still very important, especially for immunocompromised people and their carers. So what we do for COVID is we ask everybody who comes in to wear a mask. We ask people to have taken a lateral flow test within the last 7 days, and we have tests available for free. We have masks available for free, and we have ventilation, like an air purifier. The pay what you can aspect of the cafe is very important because money is an access issue as well. And we want people to eat, even if they're very, very poor, especially if they're very, very poor. And clearly communicating all of these things in plain language is very important to us too. We also have like our worker policies are focused on our principles of anarchism, autonomy, self-defined boundaries, and breaks whenever we want, and an anti-capitalist approach to health, which basically says stay home if you need to for any reason, if you're sick, if you need a mental health day, if you're burnt out, because the space, to us, the workers' safety and comfort and dignity is the most important thing. And we are not perfect at all. There are lots of access things that we know about that we've not been able to implement yet. So I've kind of called these failures and aspirations. I want to highlight the clean needle exchange and a safe injection site is something that we really want to do, but the Home Office makes it illegal to be a safe injection site, though we did just install a sharps disposal box like in between writing this. So I'm very proud of us for that. We currently don't have any accountability process for abusive customers or community members because we don't have capacity for that. Something that I think could use more talking about is the idea of competing access needs. So for instance, if someone has a dog allergy, that's a competing access need with someone who needs a service dog. So we have made a decision about that. And I think the way to, whatever the decision for your context, like the thing to do is communicate it clearly rather than sort of like waffle or pretend you haven't had to make a decision. And then lastly, as somebody else already mentioned, like the development of Yiddish disability justice vocabulary. This is something that we want very much and we try to work on, but for a lot of words, we just use English loanwords because we would rather use those than terms which are not appropriate for various reasons. Be they because they're outdated or they're offensive or they're just inaccurate and not descriptive. And now I will pass it over to freygl.
Thanks, Misha. So Queer Yiddish Camp launched in spring 2022 with a 2-week immersive online program. of Yiddish language and cultural classes taught by a 17-member all-queer faculty to over 70 participants. As with the early usage and intentions behind the word queer, which went beyond thinking of gay, lesbian, bi, trans, etc., as personal or community identity markers, and instead was about putting forward a radical politic of critiquing intersecting systems of oppression and struggling for liberatory transformation, so too did Queer Yiddish Camp set out from the start to be more than just an identity-based space. We already knew that queers love Yiddish, but we didn't have a space within most mainstream Yiddish institutions for our intersectional feminist politics. This means anti-imperialist, anti-capitalist, anti-colonial, including anti or non-Zionist. This also includes addressing the inherent classism in the high cost of courses and intensives, in which reduced rates, if they are given at all, are still very expensive at the lowest end and are often not advertised, forcing individuals to have to explain their personal circumstances on a case-by-case basis. I will mention a positive exception is Boston Worker Circle, who have remained true to their socialist roots in making explicit that no one will be turned away for lack of funds. In this vein, Queer Yiddish Camp offers scholarships to everyone who asked. That was the majority of students, including tuition down to $0. Inevitably, organizations that take a conservative, fear-based approach to inclusive change by centering straight white cis men in leadership and pedagogy, for example, and dole out limited space in leadership participation or programming content for literally all other identities, are also not going to be places where collective access is prioritized. Instead, accessibility, if it is considered at all, is thought of as a budget line item and checklist. In creating Queer Yiddish Camp and its network of related community groups, we realized that if we on the margins wanted to be centered instead of harmed, we were going to have to do it ourselves. We enacted the disability justice principle of cross-disability solidarity and recognized that the leadership team was made up of people who did not hold every marginal identity. We took great efforts to make sure that our content and courses addressed multiple points of access and responded to community feedback. We didn't plan to be the first Yiddish intensive to offer trilingual Yiddish-English ASL, but when applicants put this on their list of accessibility needs, which we open-endedly asked on the application form, our response was not, there's no way we could afford this, but what would we need to do to make it possible? We did this with zero startup budget, fundraising thousands of dollars from our community and through one foundation grant. The slide shows a screenshot from one of our Zoom classes that used ASL with the interpreter on the left and the teacher on the right, both named Miriam. It's not possible that institutions with budgets in the multi-millions or even marginally greater than ours don't have the capacity to provide greater access. I think perhaps they're afraid of what it would mean for their status quo if more diverse and marginalized voices took up space. By not doing the work to dismantle transphobia, ableism, racism, and classism, these institutions continue to harm. Queer Yiddish Camp doesn't just want the future of Yiddish to be queer and trans, but intersectionally inclusive, which means multiracial, cross-class, disabled, and more. Passing it to Ruby.
The issue of social class runs through both language justice, including Yiddish, and disability justice and accessibility. Disabled community members very often find themselves in a lower social class due to discrimination, insufficient government support, and embedded misconceptions of skills and competence, making resources, including education, less financially accessible. The same is often true of immigrant foreign-speaking communities. Yiddish-speaking immigrants to the United States experience this, and through shame about their language, our language, put enormous energies into raising their social status, particularly through rejecting Yiddish. Yiddish, in particular, had a strong connection with social class. This shame-fueled upward mobility was, of course, accompanied by assimilation, as we gave up a great deal of our passion and creativity. The class-based abandoning of Yiddish happened in countries of Western Europe as well, but a half century earlier than our waves of immigration to the US, as people aspired to be German, for example, and assimilated. The dialects of Yiddish in Eastern Europe had a very definite class component as well, and although YIVO-style standardization in the US seemed a reasonable tool for preservation, dialects were and are a map of the diverse cultures of the Yiddish world, and those cultures are becoming lost, if not lost already, in that process. To really understand Yiddish, it is imperative to understand and honor the dialects and their class associations.
By now, we hope you're building an understanding of why it's important to talk about accessibility in Yiddish and disability justice in Yiddish. We're going to send you into groups to talk more about how and why this is relevant to Yiddish culture and Yiddish futures in your own spheres of influence. How do the 10 principles of disability justice show up in your life, family, community, organization, and institutions? What's an action you can take to model your organizing, community, workplace, program, etc. after one or more of these principles? The 10 principles of disability justice and breakout room questions are available at the link posted in the chat. Please open it before joining a breakout room because the chat will get cleared once you go into a breakout room. We will be back in 6 minutes. Please be prepared to share one question, reflection, or action item on your group's mind. And remember, if you want to stay with the captioner, please decline the invite.
And Ruby, I think you're starting us off.
I don't have that piece of the script.
I can do it. Although we told you this workshop is about the principles of how we organize together, this is not just a to-do list of accessibility requirements. Still, access is an important component of disability justice. Accessibility is something that happens along many different pathways. The goal is for everyone to be able to show up as their whole self, mentally, physically, emotionally, and spiritually. Historically, many organizations have thought about that physical pathway first, but the other three are just as important. Let's think about this for a minute in the context of Yiddish cultural organizing. As we give a few examples, go ahead and enter other examples you might think of in the chat. So physical accessibility could mean planning in-person events in spaces that can be easily accessed by public transit and navigated by mobility devices. It means planning activities that aren't restricted by age, size, or ability. It means providing robust virtual options, and it means thinking carefully about when events are held in person versus virtually. For people to be able to show up mentally, we need to work together to create a learning environment that doesn't assume prior knowledge, to promote teaching styles that adapt to student needs, and have educational and cultural offerings that don't create stressful financial barriers. We need to be mindful about how class intersects with planning and creating a learning environment.
All right, so if folks want to either share in the chat, and Sorka, you can pause the slides for this as we're doing another time of discussion, either sharing in the chat or coming off mute, some other examples of accessibility. And we'll just take one or two as we're about to wrap up the workshop. Camila writes, scent-free and low chemical load spaces, low sensory spaces. Maybe one or two more examples.
Providing active listeners and offering content notes before speeches and other material presented.
Yeah, that's great, thanks.
The good news is, whether we realize it or not, a lot of us are already operating in ways that include accessibility around these axes. Yiddish organizations have been offering online classes since well before the pandemic started. More teaching materials are now available that make fewer assumptions about prior exposure to oisius or traditional Yiddish culture and make room for different learning styles and life experiences. From our case studies, Morgan has commented that making an accessible physical space was much easier than he expected it to be. Queer Yiddish Camp was delighted to find out that there were multiple ASL interpreters who were fluent in Yiddish and excited to work trilingually. There are challenges, especially around funding, but so many things are doable.
We want to send you back out into your communities with some tools for making these great ideas actionable. Here is one short list. There's also a bigger resource doc with more in-depth material that has guided us in quite a few endeavors, including putting this workshop together, that we will be sending the conference organizers to pass on to all participants.
And thank you once again to the organizers of this workshop, to my fellow organizers, to the Farbindungen conference for having us, and to all of you who joined us today or will be capturing the recording later. We hope you will take these resources and commit to co-creating accessible, just, disabled Yiddish futures.